Hi, everyone. My name is Tiffany, and this is Growing Up Shaman. Today, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about what it's like working in the medical field. I've worked in the medical field for about 28 years now, and I've had a number of unusual things happen in that time. So, I just wanted to tell two stories that happened between me and some colleagues. They're very different situations, and I don't even know what to call them. Um, so, here we go. So, the very first time I had an unusual experience with a colleague, this happened about, I don't know, 12, 13 years ago. And I was working in a hospital. And in this hospital, we oftentimes employed subcontractors who were doing remodeling inside the hospital. And every time I used to see this one subcontractor, every time I would see him, his face was that of someone I knew. And the face was of someone by the name of Art. Now, Art was the boss of my ex-boyfriend, and I had known him for years. So, whenever I thought I saw him in the hospital, um, it was unusual to see him in that location because, I would always see him whenever I was with my boyfriend and not at my work, clearly. So, every time I'd pass by this guy, all of a sudden I would see Art's face. And I'd always do a double take to see, like, is that Art? Did I just see who I think it was? But every time I would turn around and look again, it was somebody else. It was the same guy. Um, so I was just like, well, that's weird, the first time it happened. But this started to happen all the time. Like every single time I saw this guy in the hallways, his face was not his own. It had Art's face in his face. But when I turned back around, it would always go back to his regular face. And so this happened many times. And I remember it getting to the point where I was like, okay, this is awkward. This guy probably thinks I'm trying to check him out because I'm always doing these double takes. And but that wasn't the case at all. I was not trying to check him out. I was just confused why I kept seeing Art's face in his face. And so one day I got into the elevator right outside of the laboratory where I worked, and I found myself in the elevator with this same guy. And so, in an effort to make it not so awkward, I decided to start a little chat with him. And I was like, "You wouldn't happen to have a brother named Art, do you?" And he goes, "No, but I used to know a guy named Art." And I was like, "Oh, is it Art?" I said the last name. And he goes, "Yes. How did you know that?" He goes, "I haven't worked with Art in 20 years, but we used to work together for many years before I retired." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's weird. Are we sure we're talking about the same Art? That because that last name that Art had was very common." And I was like, "Does he have three boys? Is their names this and this and this?" And he was like, "Yes, yes, that's him." And I was like, "Oh." He was like, "How do you know that?" And I honestly could not be truthful with him. I was just like, "Oh, I don't know. You just look like him." I just tried to come up with some silly reasoning for this weird coincidence. But anyways, that was the very first time I had an experience with spirit and another colleague. I mean, this guy, I didn't even know his name. I still don't know his name, but I know his friend was Art. But anyways, so fast forward about 10 years or so, and I'm working, oh, maybe not even that long, probably just a couple of years. And I'm working in a different facility, and I'm working in one of those freestanding ERs. And right outside of my laboratory, there used to be a social worker that was stationed there. And at one point, a new social worker was coming in, and they were training her. So there were two social workers there. And every time I used to walk out of my laboratory and walk down this hallway, I would pass by this girl that she wouldn't give me any eye contact. And but every time I would pass by her, I would hear in my head, sister named Christy. And um, I just was like, well, that's kind of weird, but okay, whatever. And but it wasn't something that was a one-time thing. This happened like every single time I would pass by this woman in the hallway, which was on the daily, basically. I would hear that sister named Christy. So one time I found myself in one of the patient rooms with this social worker. We were by ourselves, just kind of cleaning up the room. And so I decided to ask her. I was like, hey, do you have a sister named Christy? And she stopped what she was doing and she was like, well, that was incredibly random. Yes, I do. And I was like, oh, really? Does she work at blah, blah, blah? And she goes, no. And I go, well, does she work blah, blah, blah? And she goes, no, no. She stopped me and she was like, no, she doesn't work here in Texas at all. She actually lives in Lebanon. And she was like, that is so weird. And I was like, oh well, you just look like somebody, that I knew named Christy that worked at blah blah blah, just trying to cover my tracks because I wasn't out of the shamanic closet at that time. And I just felt like she was someone that spirit wanted me to connect with for whatever reason. Um, Honestly, my feeling was that this sister Christy that she had must have been a pretty special person. Like I felt like God really liked her. Like she was one of his favorites. So I actually ended up becoming friends with this social worker, and I still haven't even told her this story to this day that I knew that her sister's name was Kristen because of spirit, because she's actually like super Christian, and so she's not very open minded about these kinds of things, which I understand. I was raised Christian too, so I understand where she's coming from. Um, but what's interesting about that story is I knew that one of these days I was going to be ending up meeting this Christy lady. And like 7 years later, I ended up meeting her at a party. And what's strange about the moment that I met her was that, I mean, I had met her before, but it was just like a quick hello, bye kind of thing, not like a sit down and have a conversation with her. But the first time I did have a chance to sit down and have a conversation with her, it was at this party. And who was with us? A I don't know what you call these people, but it was a man who was in the seminary, like he was training to be a priest. He wasn't a Catholic priest yet, but he was training to be one. And Christy was actually super religious. And it turns out she was a missionary in Lebanon. So she was doing the Lord's work, and I think that's why spirit just had her highlighted in my mind the moment I met her sister. So, anyways, I just wanted to share that story because I have no idea what you call that very first story. Like, I've never heard of anybody else having any kind of experience like that. But if you have, I would love to hear about it. So, if you haven't already, please subscribe. Don't forget to like and share and comment. And I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.